Wednesday, everyone. This is Zain Bando. This is Bando's Breakdowns, episode 25. Very, very happy to be back. First full week in October is now officially in full swing, as is the official full swing of fall sports. So excited to be back talking to you guys today about everything in the world of sports. Before we get moving on that, though, just wanted to remind you all to please be sure to like and subscribe. It's the climb to 1,000 continues. YouTube.com/ETP Network. Again, if you like this show that I do, if you like the MMA Outsider show, if you like the Bando's Blitz short video segments that I do that come out just before the weekend every single week. We've been doing those for about a month and a half now or so. Somewhere in there, we've done a couple of them. You can check those out across social media as well. So if you like all the content, pretty much in a nutshell, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to follow the network across social media at ETV Network. Be sure to follow myself, Zain Bando, at ZanBando99 across social media. That's Instagram, X, etc. there. Then, of course, you can catch my work here also with this show, MMA Outsiders Football Forecast, etc. You could also catch my other work, courtesy of MMA Knockout in several other places. So, very, very happy to be back. We have a jam-packed show today, though. But before we get into anything, before we really get into the meat and potatoes of this whole thing, just want to remind you that Bando's Breakdowns in every single show across the network is presented by Playback. So watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience, from playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Again, as always, right before the NBA season officially gets underway, you can join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule, which again is going to include a lot of NBA regular season basketball moving forward. So stay tuned for all of that and so much more. We're going to get into it, though, with Zan's overview. We have a lot to go over in Zan's overview today. Just to give you a little run through of what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be going over some college football. I'm going to be previewing Illinois versus Purdue. We're going to be going over some NFL news and notes, briefly previewing UFC Vegas 98, a major boxing match for the light heavyweight championship between Beterbiev and Bivol. I'll remind you of my pick there, and then a few other notable news and notes, including some breaking news on the NFL coaching front as well. But we're going to officially get started with the first topic is Zan's overview, and that is the madness that occurred in college football. We had a lot going on this past weekend. We had a lot. So we had number 1 Alabama go down. We had number 4 Tennessee go down. Number 9 Missouri. Number 10 Michigan. Number 11 USC. And number 22 Louisville. We're going to start it though with number 1 Alabama. They played Vanderbilt, and of course they lost. It was a 40-35 final score. Absolutely incredible game by Diego Paiva. Literally carried the team on his back to win this one. I don't think Alabama was victory hungover, if you will, after the Georgia loss. I just simply think that that Alabama played against a Vanderbilt team that was ready to go. And sometimes you're going to get these games where there's a massive upset involved or a big underdog wins or something like that, and you just don't see it coming. This was one of those games. I thought Vanderbilt did pretty well. I think it also is a little disrespectful that they didn't get the AP love that I thought they deserved. I mean, beating number 1 has to count for something. I understand that the AP poll is the AP poll, and they have to do what they have to do. But Alabama dropping from number 1 to number 7 in the latest edition of the AP Top 25 poll to me was interesting, because if you look at this from a general landscape, you know, as we move into a new week in college football, week 7 that is, you got Alabama sitting at number 7, and you have Georgia sitting at number 5. And to me, I think wins need to count for something. If Alabama, considering that Alabama beat Georgia head to head a week ago, I feel like Alabama should still be ranked higher than Georgia. But for Vanderbilt to not even get any love in the AP Top 25 at all, and only receive receiving votes, they received 26 receiving votes in the AP top 25, but still had SMU, who we're going to get into in a second. They beat Louisville. Still has SMU sitting at number 25, in Michigan, who many people believe shouldn't be ranked in this week's AP top 25, sitting at number 24. So in the general consensus with that one is make it make sense. Now we're going to look at Tennessee. They lost Arkansas over the weekend. This was a classic game. There have been several years in a row where it looked like, this was going to be the year for Arkansas. This was finally the year for Arkansas to get it done. This was a great environment. The way they won this game, the way they were able to rally from behind. And obviously, Tennessee is very good. They have a very good quarterback. But, sometimes you're going to get these slip up games where you just don't know. And very similarly to the Alabama loss, Tennessee, I think, was just caught in a bind. They probably thought this Arkansas game was going to be easy. They probably were looking past this game a little bit, knowing that they had other huge games on their schedule moving forward. In a very difficult conference that's now expanded a little bit with Texas and Oklahoma, et cetera, moving up from the Big 12. So, there's a lot to unpack there. I don't think Tennessee should be panicking too much, though, considering that this was its first loss of the year. So they'll just have to regroup and get back on the horse. Speaking of Tennessee, Tennessee fell from number 4 to number 8 in the latest edition of the AP poll, sitting right above Ole Miss and just below Alabama, which makes a lot of sense considering that those two teams have yet to play and will be playing each other relatively soon. And this is one of those teams too. When you look at Tennessee, I mean, their schedule so far has not been all that difficult. Outside of the Arkansas loss, and they do play a Florida team this week that I think is very inconsistent. So that should be a bounce back win for them there. Looking at Missouri, they got absolutely trounced against Texas A&M. Looking at the score, they're 41-10 at Kyle Field. Again, Missouri needed a letdown game. It was going to have a letdown game at some point, and this was going to be the game. I think Texas A&M is very underrated with Elko as their coach. I think their offense is now firing on all cylinders, and I just don't think Missouri was ready for that raucous environment at Kyle Field. It's known as one of the loudest college football stadiums in the country, and I think they brought the noise in. This game was arguably over by halftime. So this was just one of those other crazy upsets. Hostile environment didn't go the way in Missouri. They're going to have to bounce back because their SEC schedule only gets tougher from here moving forward. And this was a team under Eli Drinkwitz that, was supposed to do a lot of damage in the SEC, especially considering they did make it to the Cotton Bowl last year, beating Ohio State in arguably the best season that the program has ever had. So just something to keep in mind there. Then you have to go and look at Michigan. It seemed like Michigan was, on their way to figuring things out. They'd won 3 games in a row. What did Jerome Moore had, figured out like, okay, this is my program now. And Washington did everything and then some to knock off the Wolverines, get their national championship revenge, 27-17. And this is not going to be an easy road for Michigan. I mean, as I just alluded to, they're now ranked below Illinois. Those two teams play each other in Champaign a week from Saturday. That's October 19th, the Memorial Stadium rededication game, to honor former Bears and Illini legend Red Grange. Michigan still has to worry about that game. They still have to worry about Ohio State. There's a couple of games that Michigan still has to worry about. So to drop this game along with the game against currently number one Texas earlier in the year was really, really disappointing from their perspective, just considering that now with this expanded 12-team playoff, 2 losses and you're a fringe college football playoff team. So if they lose one more game, they are most certainly out. Unless they somehow go on and win the Big Ten, which I don't think is going to be possible unless they beat Ohio State at the end of the year. That's the position that they put themselves in, and they beat Ohio State the last couple years. That was obviously under the Jim Harbaugh regime, but now looking at how well Ohio State has played and just how consistent their offense is and what Chip Kelly has been able to do since going over to Ohio State, and where Ohio State currently sits, the number 2 team in the country, getting ready to play Oregon this weekend. That Michigan game is now as bigger stakes now than it ever did. You could have a scenario where at the end of the year, Michigan is trying to play, to knock Ohio State out of Big Ten conference title contention, whereas Michigan, would have to win that game to keep their playoff hopes alive no matter what happens in the conference standings at the end of the year. So Michigan just backed themselves into a corner, and it's going to be interesting to see how they get out of it. Looking over at USC now, USC seemed like a team that everybody was high on, early in the year. The way that they were able to beat LSU at the beginning of the season, and then they've had now a couple of slip ups. This one being to a Minnesota team that, quite frankly, is not very good. I think simply this was just the weekend of upsets. USC didn't play well. They have to go back to the drawing board. Looking at where USC currently sits now, they were at number 11 going into the game. USC is now out of the top 25 because of this loss, and they have a very difficult game this upcoming weekend against Penn State. Although the game is at home, Penn State has been a wagon as of late. They did beat UCLA last week, despite Penn State not being able to cover the spread, which was a bummer for me because I had them as one of my Bando's Blitz plays. So for those of you who got burned on that, I apologize. We're going to try to do better this upcoming week. But USC has sort of backed themselves into a corner at this point. They need to probably win out to give themselves any hope of, finishing near the top of the standings in the Big Ten, or let alone getting a backdoor into the Big Ten championship game, which now is going to be way more difficult when you're looking at, contenders like Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, and Illinois, still considering Illinois only as a loss and 2 ranked wins under its belt. Finally, looking over to Louisville. Louisville also lost this past weekend in a shootout, 34-27. I pretty much think Louisville has ruined its chances of really doing anything at this point. They've now lost to Notre Dame, and they've now lost. They've now lost to Notre Dame, and then obviously, looking at their remaining schedule, just going forward, it's not an easy schedule at all. I mean, you got Virginia, which is probably a winnable game. Then you host Miami, who had one of the luckiest wins in college football over the weekend, knocking off Cal in the final seconds there. And then you got Boston College, who's been decent this year. You got Clemson, who looks like the best Clemson version in a couple years. You got a Stanford team that's hit or miss. You got a Pittsburgh team that's okay. Um, they really dug themselves a hole losing back-to-back games to Notre Dame and SMU 2 weeks in a row, which I think buries any hope of a ACC championship, much less an ACC conference title game, where it's probably going to end up being Clemson versus either Pittsburgh or Clemson versus Miami. It'll be something. It'll be something along those lines, just considering where Louisville currently sits. But a bad loss for the Cardinals there, and just a really overall a wild college football Saturday, and a day that if you bet and you lost, there's a good chance that you probably lost some of these upsets, and that just goes to show the parity in college football, which is why it makes it, just simply one of the best fall sports, if not one of the best sports on the entire planet. So just something to keep in mind there, that upsets are very much possible. All right, now we're going to move on. We're going to move over to UFC now. We had UFC 307. This took place in Salt Lake City, Utah, Saturday night. We had Alex Pereira defending his UFC light heavyweight championship against Khalil Roundtree. It's his third title defense in a 7-month period. Very, very shocking. I think it's 159 or 158 days since his first UFC championship defense. So congratulations to Pereira for just reaching new heights and making the light heavyweight division one of the premier divisions in the sport. So congratulations to him on that. Khalil Roundtree, absolute tough customer to take this fight. Again, he was a top 10 ranked light heavyweight. A lot of people didn't think that. A lot of people thought he didn't deserve it. A lot of people thought that Magomed Ankalaev did, rightfully so. He's got Alexander Rakic coming up in Abu Dhabi in a couple of weeks at UFC 308. So if he wins that fight, there's a good chance the Pereira's next fight will be against a guy with the longest active winning streak in the light heavyweight division with 12 consecutive wins. The co-main event, very interesting co-main event between Juliana Pena and Raquel Pennington. Juliana Pena gets the split decision win, 40-47 on 2 out of the 3 judges' scorecards. Against Pennington, who nearly finished Pena in the 4th round, dropped her with the right hand, nearly finished her with a TKO. But overall, a tough fight. Good to see Pena win. She's marketable. It just sucks now that she really blew her chance to give one of the biggest promos in UFC bantamweight history and call out Kayla Harrison, and instead wants to lure Amanda Nunes out of retirement. I've heard mixed inquiries on what Amanda Nunes' status is in mixed martial arts, so it remains to be seen whether or not that potential trilogy fight happens, and or if the Kayla Harrison fight will come to fruition. But overall, a very tough fight to score. If you haven't watched the fight, go back and watch it. It really comes down to how you scored in round 1. I scored in round 1 for Pennington, which told me that I thought Pennington won 3 out of the 5 rounds, but I'm no judge. The judges gave it to Pena, and you got to move on from that. Pennington will be back, still one of the brightest contenders in the division. Snapped a 6-fight win streak, and is definitely still someone to keep an eye on. Someone whose stock, in my opinion, rose despite a loss, considering that she nearly finished the now 2-time UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion. Overall on this card, I went 6-6. Not the best card in the world for me. Not the best start to the month of October. As I alluded to in the month of September on UFC, I went 18-18. So we're looking for a better rebound week with the upcoming cards over the next few weeks, including UFC Vegas 98. We're going to take a small break from MMA, though. We're going to go over to the NFL. The Bears dominate the Carolina Panthers, remain undefeated at home, and, look like they're firing on all cylinders. This is a game that the Bears were supposed to win. I picked the Bears to win. I was correct. This Panthers team is in deep turmoil. To see Bryce Young just be emotionally distraught after the game, and not really knowing what his full motivation is. I don't know if the Panthers broke this kid or what happened to him, but I just feel like the Panthers at this point are a lost cause. Well, the Bears are slowly but surely figuring things out. So I was happy with this win. I thought Caleb Williams played well. I thought the defense played well. I thought the crowd was into it the whole game. This is a game that you're supposed to win, during this chunk of the schedule where I kind of alluded to it. You got to go to London. You got a game against the Cardinals. And then, of course, you have a couple other games sandwiched in before you come home and play the Patriots. This is the easier part of your schedule where if you could win these games now, kind of as I alluded to last week, if you get to 5-2, if you get to 6-2, somewhere around there, you're really setting yourself up for success for a gauntlet of the end of November and December where you're playing, some of the best teams in the NFL and the Packers. And, you're playing Seattle, who is, which is a little bit inconsistent at the moment, did just lose to the Giants, but I still think they're a pretty good team. But I think this Bears schedule is setting themselves up well for success and to stay in the NFC wildcard hunt, because I think Minnesota and Green Bay, probably Minnesota and Detroit, will be battling for the top spot, assuming Minnesota remains undefeated. They're one of the best success stories in the NFL. Sam Darnold going from being a literal bust in the league to being one of the best quarterbacks, not just in the NFC, but in all pro football. So a good win for the Bears. Get another win, get above 500, 3-2 on the season. And next up is the Jaguars, so it should be exciting. And we will preview that a little bit later on in the show. But we're going to move back over to college football now. Illinois off the bye week, hosting Purdue for the Cannon Trophy. Illinois is trying to get the trophy back for the first time since Lovie Smith was the head coach in Champaign in 2019. Illinois has struggled against this Purdue team in the past. I don't know what it is. In 2022, they had a chance to put a stranglehold on a Big Ten West championship with a few games to go, up 3 games with a couple to play had they defeated Purdue. That didn't happen. Purdue won, and it allowed Purdue a path to make it to the Big Ten championship game. where they eventually lost to Michigan in that same year in what would be Jeff Brom's final game as Purdue coach before he left to go coach Louisville, which is where he is now. But looking over to the present now, Bret Bielema's got a pretty good team. I alluded to it last week. I think they got the right quarterback in place. Luke Altmaier's legit. He's really bounced back from a difficult sophomore year. Coming in as a transfer from Ole Miss, I think he's really made some nice strides. Pat Bryant has become the big play receiver in the Big Ten that everybody thought he could be a couple years ago, coming out of Florida, Duval County, that is. Then, of course, you got a really nice running back room. You got Caden Fagan, you got Aiden Lawfrey, and you have guys that can really move the ball and keep the offense as efficient as they can. Then you got a defense that's just overall really underrated defense led by a couple of studs at linebacker and in the secondary. So this Illinois team is legit. They deserve to be ranked number 23. As I alluded to it, they got 2 AP top 25 wins in the month of September, knocking off Nebraska and Kansas. Of course, they were able to defeat Eastern Illinois in the first game of the season, and they were also able to defeat Central Michigan. So this is a start that I don't think a lot of people would have expected. I would have maybe thought, okay, if Illinois is 3-2 after 5 games, I would be satisfied. But to be sitting at 4-1 off the bye, playing a Purdue team that's just in shambles, they fired their OC Graham Harrell. Ryan Walters, who was the former defensive coordinator under Bielema in his first season, looks like he's going absolutely nowhere with this Purdue program, although he is only in his second year, so it is going to take some time. However, they did just have their lone top 400 recruit decommit from Purdue's upcoming class, so that is very, very concerning from their perspective. And this is a game that Illinois should win. Last I looked, the betting line on this game per BetMGM was 18.5. This is a game that you got to win. This is Illinois Hall of Fame weekend, right before the rededication game. You got to get to 6-1 and going into play Michigan, a Michigan team that looks like they're struggling, a Michigan team that's a ranking below you. And this is a game where Illinois could be setting themselves up to be favored against the defending national champions next week. This is a game that you cannot afford to lose. They have to get the cannon back. I think they do it. I think the final score is 38-10. I think they rout Purdue. They have the lead the whole game. I think Luke Altmaier throws 3 touchdowns. I think Carson Goda catches one. I think Pat Bryant catches one. And I also think that Caden Fagan does find the end zone from a couple yards out. And I do think the defense does enough to force a couple of turnovers off of a Purdue offense that's just brutal. They only scored 6 points against Wisconsin. Their lone win was against Indiana State, which is nothing to really smile at. That's a game that you're supposed to win. This is a game that Illinois can't afford to lose. I think they win this one. I think they get to 5-1 on the year. He accidentally just said 6-1 just now. I meant to say 5-1 on the year. Bielema remains undefeated off the bye week, and the Michigan game and Oregon games are on the horizon. You have a chance to really do something special if you can win these next 2 games. This Purdue and Michigan game, to really see how far this team can go, because this is a chance to be a really special team. We'll see how Illinois does. As an alum, I am a little nervous, although I shouldn't be nervous considering how bad Purdue is. But given Purdue's past history and the way that they've dominated the series as of late, there is a cause for concern to just be a little bit nervous that maybe Illinois won't play as well as it probably should. But I am still picking Illinois to win the game. All right, now we're going to move over to the MLB postseason just to give you a brief run through as to what's going on. So it's the American League Division Series. Looking over to the ALDS Series, both series are tied 1-1. We had the Royals taking care of business over the Yankees 4-2 in their last game, and then we had the Tigers knocking off Cleveland in their last game. And obviously, this is being recorded on Tuesday, so this was as a Monday night's final score. So obviously, this is going to change. We got the Phillies and the Mets. Obviously, going into that series, that's going to be Game 3 in New York, and then of course the series everybody's talking about is the Dodgers and the Padres. So My World Series pick of Yankees and Dodgers is still in play. It's going to be interesting, though. If the Mets potentially ruin these plans if they make it to the championship series and they pull off a miracle there. But the MLB postseason is in full swing. If you and I meant that as a pun, and I also meant that literally as well. If you want a fuller, broader scope or breakdown, you can definitely check out the latest episodes of Hitting for the Cycle, as Ryan and Ben will take you through the MLB postseason all the way until the end. Just wanted to give you some final scores to look out for as well, and to give you also the upcoming schedule. So tonight you got the Yankees and Royals in Kansas City, and obviously sitting on Thursday night you got the Dodgers and the Padres, and then of course also Thursday night the Guardians and the Tigers, and of course also Thursday night Yankees and Royals, and then they're just going to keep going back and forth through the remainder of the weekend as we get all the way through to the end of the series before we'll make it down to four teams before a potential World Series matchup is finally decided. So very, very exciting. October is here. MLB postseason baseball is happening. It's the start of the NBA regular season as well. So a lot of exciting stuff going on in sports from that perspective too. All right, just really briefly here, UFC Vegas 98, Royval versus Tyra in the main event, number 1 versus number 5 at flyweight. You guys already know how I feel about this one. I like Brandon Royval in this fight. Just to do a really, really, really brief breakdown. If you want more analysis on this fight, you can check out episode 101 of the MMA Outsiders that just dropped yesterday with myself and Pat Dannon. So if you want more info on those fights, you can check it out. Just a couple of news and notes to get through with this one. We have an early start for this card. We got a 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific start. I will be in Las Vegas for this one. Looking at the main event, we got Royval versus Tyra. Obviously, I like Royval by decision. He's won 4 out of his last 5. Tyra is coming in undefeated at 16-0. Just knocked off Alex Perez a couple of months ago in a fight that was very, very interesting, very technical. Unfortunately, ended in an injury. Royval coming in as the slight underdog. Tyra on the comeback as the favorite at minus 200. Should overall be an interesting fight. The Tapology predictions have Tyra at an 80% clip compared to Royval's 20%. So we'll see how the fight goes. Again, it's a 13 fight card from the Apex. Don't miss it. ESPN Plus, 4 Eastern prelim start, followed by the main card. You get the entire thing on ESPN Plus. And it will recap the entire show next week on episode 102. One final UFC note before we move on to our next order of business. You're just taking a look. As I alluded to a week ago, we were 6-6 on UFC last week, which puts my overall win total at 219 wins. So I can't fully complain with that. I would have wanted it to be just a little bit better, just on the short end. But I will take that winning percentage of above 50% and move on from that and see what we can do with the remaining cards for the rest of the year. All right, now we're going to briefly move on. Just to give you a quick pick here, boxing light heavyweight championship, Beterbiev versus Bivol. The winner has a chance to become the first undisputed light heavyweight champion since Roy Jones Jr. I like Dmitry Bivol to get this one done. I like him by decision. I think it's going to be a great fight. Would love to see him fight Canelo next. I think it's a fight that everybody should look forward to. Free on ESPN Plus. The way boxing should be from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia at a decent time. 6 p.m. Eastern as well. So in between all the college football madness and so much more, you'll be able to catch this fight. So it should be good. And I like Bivol here. So that should be a great fight as well. Really, really quick on the Bears-Jaguars game. I like the Bears to win this one. I think it's a relatively easy win. I think they win by 10, 27-17 in London. I think this Jaguars team is going nowhere fast despite beating a Colts team last week that I just don't think is very good, quite frankly. The Bears are the better team. This should strictly be treated as a business trip to London and nothing else other than that's why I like the Bears there to get the win, improve to 4-2, and really start the road portion of the midpoint of their schedule in October. So give me the Bears. All right, moving over into Zain Zinger, we have a very interesting first story off the top. There's a chance that the SEC and Big Ten could be joining. Or excuse me, we're going to start with this SEC story. It was revealed that a bunch of teams were fined for storming the field, including Vanderbilt. And I just feel like this needs to be revisited. I think that field storming in college sports is awesome. As someone who has stormed a basketball court on two separate occasions, after one upset win and another conference championship clinching win, I think it's a great part of sports. I think it takes the fun out of it when you got to find these programs hundreds of thousands of dollars for innocent college kids just having a good time. I think the SEC has bigger things to worry about, and I think we need to get off the soapbox of what is ethically right when it comes to just letting a couple of innocent college kids at a football game have a good time. Well, I thought that Vanderbilt field storm was a scene unlike any other. That's what makes college football so exciting. And again, I think the SEC has bigger things that they need to worry about. So, speaking of the SEC, looks like within the next 15 years or so, the Big Ten and SEC, they're going to try to combine 70 different college football programs to create this one super league. They're calling it Project Rudy. I think this is great for college football. I think college football needs more unison. I think they need better games. I think it needs fewer games, like a Purdue versus Indiana State, where there's going to be a blowout. I think there needs to be more transparency amongst the programs, and I think this is an awesome thing for the sport. Hopefully, the investors and the commissioners can get this done in the next couple of years because I think it benefits the sport altogether. You get more people at home on Saturdays. You get more people out to the games. It drives more revenue, and it just gives people better matchups to look forward to. I don't really care for an Alabama versus Mercer. And I'll admit it, as somebody who went to this game, I don't care about Illinois versus Eastern Illinois. I knew that Illinois was going to win that game handily, and they did, or it did rather. And I just feel that these Power Four programs need to do a better job of just making sure that every matchup, no matter what week it is, means something. Because I think that's the most critical for the growth of the sport. All right, we're going to move on now. Some big breaking news. The Jets, earlier in the day on Tuesday, at the time that we're recording this, have fired Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh finished 20-36 as the Jets coach, and I think this is the right move. He was going nowhere fast. They were losing games they shouldn't have been losing. Excuses were made for Aaron Rodgers. He had to use Zach Wilson for as long as he possibly could. That was disappointing as well. And, you just got to look. The Jets franchise has not been good. They haven't made it to the AFC Championship game since, 2010. It's been a really long time since they've also made the playoffs. And it's been a really long time since they've had a competent quarterback. I think this is just another cycle in simply put, the Jets being the Jets. And I'm not a Jets fan, but if I was a Jets fan today, I would be very, very disappointed with what has transpired, considering they brought in a guy, a future Hall of Famer, a Super Bowl champion, that was supposed to turn the franchise around, and he, meaning Aaron Rodgers and Saleh, have been unable to do that so far. So this was arguably an Aaron Rodgers decision. At least that's my theory behind that. But it'll be interesting to see where the Jets go from here, because I don't think they're going anywhere fast. I even said on the preview show for Football Forecast, if you guys heard it, that I don't think the Jets make the playoffs. And so far, I feel like I'm right about that, and I just think they're going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. So it's definitely interesting and just something to keep in mind, as well as the Jets move along and their schedule gets a little tougher. Just wanted to remind you all, we got a new week in the NFL. It's the NFL week 6 slate. We have a bunch of games. We got the Thursday night game between San Francisco and Seattle. We got Tampa Bay taking on the Saints. The Cardinals going to Green Bay. The Bears and the Jaguars playing in London. The Commanders going to Baltimore, which is the national game for most of the country. Indianapolis going to Tennessee. That might be the worst game of the week. Cleveland going to the Eagles. Houston going to New England, which all of a sudden has become a huge game because New England needs a win after getting screw jobbed against Miami. The Chargers against the Broncos, Atlanta against Carolina, Detroit against Dallas, Pittsburgh going to Vegas, the Browns going to Philadelphia, the Bengals going to the Giants, and of course the Bills going to the Jets on Monday Night Football. So week 6 isn't bad. I went 8-6 straight up last week. I'll take it. The NFL is difficult to predict. It is what it is. So that'll be fun. And then a couple of college football top 25 games to look forward to, as I alluded to. Ohio State versus Oregon is a huge game. Ole Miss versus LSU is this weekend. Colorado versus Kansas State is another game to look out for. There's a bunch of them. There's always going to be a bunch of major college football on that you don't want to miss. I would say the biggest game of the weekend, though, out of any conference is Oregon versus Ohio State. There's also some pretty major SEC games to look forward to. Can Alabama bounce back? Can Georgia keep it rolling? There's going to be a lot of questions answered this week going into week 7 of college football as to, who can really, which teams can really separate themselves from the pretenders to the contenders, if you will, as well. So that's going to do it for another edition of Bando's Breakdowns. This was a whole lot of fun. Thankfully, I didn't have any errors today as well, which is what we like to do. We like to have a clean show. Again, before we get out of here, be sure to like and subscribe. Again, youtube.com/ETV Network. You can listen to Bando's Breakdowns as well, wherever you get your podcasts and so much more. That would be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Premium, Acast, etc., etc. That's going to do it, though, for another edition. This has been episode 25. My name is Zain Bando, and once I get back from Las Vegas this upcoming weekend, I'll watch a report when it comes to episode 26 and so much more in the world of sports. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you guys soon. Have a good one.